Mac, nice to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Guys, I'm flattered, and I loved your episode.
Thank you so much.
The one you did on the book that you released a couple of days ago.
Thank you for slogging through it.
No, not. I watched it twice. I made my wife watch.
Wow.
I was like, check this out. These guys nailed the whole thing, and he only dinged me on a couple of things, and Mark was kind of dinged me on a couple of them. So, I mean, I was really happy to get the high scores that you guys gave, and it was so refreshing because nobody said anything about it, and that's a real drag.
Live from the Talking Joe Studios, it's Talking Joe.
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe with another special episode. Now, last episode, we were talking about the series Spy Hunter and Paperboy for our Cobra Convergence episode, and we loved that series. So if you've not yet seen it, you can absolutely check out our review and what we see what we thought of it. Thumbnail there. So we are following up that episode by talking to artist Mathew Reynolds, who did all of that wonderful artwork for that series. But I will not be talking to Matt alone. I, of course, will be joined by my regular co-host. It's a real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, listeners and viewers, and hello, Mark.
Hello, Tim. Let's introduce our guest, shall we? So, joining us today is Arkansas resident Mathew Reynolds. He started out in comics back in the early days of Malibu on books like Airman and The Protectors. More recently, he has worked on the Mercenary Sea from Image, the RUFF and REDDY Show from DC Comics, and even more recently with G.I. Joe writer Larry Hama on Spy Hunter and Paperboy. So let's introduce him. Here he is. Hi, Matt.
Hey, guys. What's going on?
All good here. So good of you to join us.
It's great to be here. I was really knocked out by the show that you did. There was so much love, and I watched it twice because I'm a narcissist, and I made my wife watch it and say, "See, look, they like me." So it was cool.
Excellent.
Thank you, and you're welcome.
Absolutely. And I think we'll absolutely have to talk about Spy Hunter. Get your take on some of the behind the scenes things on the project, and find out if some of our educated guesses on the behind the scenes were true or not. But before that,
you did really good.
Excellent. Let's talk origin stories. So typically when we're talking to artists, we'll be talking about their G.I. Joe origins and their art origins. But I think, Tim, you had something on the tip of your tongue first.
Mathew Reynolds, what do we call you?
You can just call me Matt.
Matt with a T, with one T.
Yeah, that's fine. The Mac Ray thing came from it was an accident that just stuck to me. And I was like, well, okay, if DC likes it, then maybe it sounds like some kind of a, I don't know, rock and roll comic book name or something. So I ran with it.
Not to jump too far ahead, but how was that accident an accident?
I met Shaken at a show, and he saw the Vic Falcon stuff, and he was like, "This is great. But you need to do some work in the majors." And I stayed in touch with him. And my email was Mac Ray 1973, and he introduced me to everybody at DC as Mac. And everybody, all the editors, everybody at DC were all, "Hi, Mac. Good to talk with you today." Chiarello's like, "Mac, would you like to do a ghost, what was it, Space Ghost cover?" I was like, and they're all calling me Mac, and I'm too intimidated to say, "Guys, what are you calling me Mac for?" You know, besides, I'm a big fan of McMurphy from Cuckoo's Nest, who they call Mac, and I'm a big fan of McCready from The Thing, who they call Mac. And I was like, okay, Mac it is. That's how it started. My wife hates it.
That clears up so much, Matt, with a T. All right, Mark, back to you and our usual question number one.
Yeah, I mean, the mix up with the name is a good pedigree, because one of my favorite artists is known as either Mick McMahon or Mike McMahon, who was a 2000 AD creator, worked on Judge Dredd, most famous for, did a series called The Last American. And I think this is the right way around, that he was at 2000 AD, he was known as Mick for a long time. It might be the other way around. It might have been Mike. But whichever way around it was initially the wrong way around. It was just they misheard him when he introduced himself, and he was too polite to correct them. So was called by the wrong name for the best part of 20 years, I think, or something. But
when I discovered those 2000 AD comics in the 80s as a kid, I was really knocked out by those. I mean, we didn't see them very often over here. You'd find one in a quarter bin or something. They were a special find. You know, I think I remember seeing Bisley's early work in some of those books.
Yeah, that's where he got his start on the likes of ABC Warriors. So yes, origin stories. Which one happened first for you? Was it G.I. Joe, or was it art, or was it around about the same time?
I didn't put enough effort into the artwork until G.I. Joe came out. I mean, I was always drawing, and I never went to art school or anything, but I always had a feel for it. But there was a time, so I don't know, I was maybe 10, and I saw Jaws, and I got so infatuated with sharks. And I really wasn't a big reader until I was 10, aside from comic books. And so I went to the public library and got every book on sharks that I could get and started drawing sharks because I was infatuated with them, the different species. And then I started drawing, then I got into the world's most dangerous predators. I got into tigers, drawing wolves, drawing grizzly bears, rattlesnakes, tarantulas. Raiders of the Lost Ark had a huge impact on me, and Jaws. And for a while, I thought maybe I would do wildlife illustration. But the G.I. Joe books just really pushed me into... I started drawing better when I started drawing the G.I. Joe characters that I really loved. Because there was a different feel for me. For you know, a merciless shark in the ocean whose name I don't know, as opposed to drawing Lonzo Wilkinson, the ex-street gang leader that got his life together and joined the Joes. You know, I mean, I know who Lonzo Wilkinson is. You know what I mean? So that changed things. That put a different feeling on the artwork that I was doing. So really, G.I. Joe is it's at the heart of everything I do in one way or another. The first name I remember recognizing in comic books was Larry Hama. And this was from, I was getting Savage Sword of Conan and G.I. Joe. Those were the only things I was picking up. And Larry's name was one of the first names that I started to identify as, why is this guy's name in all my favorite comics? You know, like, you're at that age where you're starting to realize what it means to be an editor, a penciler, an inker, where I wasn't paying attention to those things. I loved John Buscema's Conan stuff, How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. My uncle got me a copy of that book when I was really young, because it looked like I had some ability of some kind, and I needed some kind of guidance. And he found this book, and it knocked me out. It was incredible. I still love John Buscema to this day.
Matt, were you buying G.I. Joe toys? Were you watching the cartoon on TV, or were you focused on the comic book?
It started with the toys. I got Breaker, I believe, Kibby, was my first Joe. And I seem to remember being bummed out that he didn't come with a piece. I don't think Breaker came with a piece of steel to deliver death to the Cobras, you know. But and then soon after that, I got Grunt and Stalker, and eventually Snake Eyes. I think I got Short Fuse next, and maybe Flash. So I was the first wave. I was in there in the first wave. I was born in '73. So I was the right age. I mean, I was who they were aiming for.
Were you did you catch the tail end of the 12-inch G.I. Joe? Did you get the 8-inch or the 10-inch Super Joe line?
Yes, but these were like hand-me-downs from cousins. Like really what I remember, I had the Lone Ranger and Tonto, like the tall. They were the 12-inch Lone Ranger and Tonto figures so I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and all the reruns and stuff on TV, I'm watching Zorro, I'm watching the Cisco Kid, Lone Ranger and Tonto, Star Trek, the original series, $6 Million Man, Starsky and Hutch, SWAT, all that 70s stuff. And so I had the $6 Million Man 12-inch figure. I had some Mego superheroes, Spider-Man, Batman, Hulk, those guys. Star Wars hits, had some Star Wars guys. I had some Micronauts. I remember stray accessories from the 12-inch Joes, like a random M14 rifle and a canteen and a binoculars that didn't really fit anybody except Steve Austin or something. So now Steve Austin has an automatic machine gun, but okay, Micronauts. I remember Micronauts, but I don't remember seeing anything like that first G.I. Joe figure. Like just the magic of the back of that card that it came on with the little paintings of all the rest of the other Joes. All of that pushed me towards what I do now graphically. I mean, like there's a section, I think it made it into the Mercenary Sea, where there's just character studies of all the characters. And I basically used the background that you guys used for this podcast. I mean, I put the Joe splash behind these characters. So I'm probably talking too much about this, but.
So did you catch the cartoon on TV? And
I waited and waited. The books came out. The animated cartoon TV commercials for the comic book. The first one I remember is Doc and Snow Job going down a icy slope on I can't remember Snow Job's vehicle's name. It's not the Bearcat.
Battle Bear.
Battle Bear. And that short piece of animation blew my mind. I was like, oh my God. There's gonna be a cartoon. I was a Saturday morning cartoon nut too. So, I'm growing up with Johnny Quest, other adventure cartoons, as well as all the other cartoons that we all loved. Blue Falcon, Wacky Racers, all that stuff. And sometimes I would see like an episode on Saturday morning I'd flip over and it would be an episode of the Hulk. It would be an Incredible Hulk cartoon, but there'd be a bunch of GIs and a base. And so just for a heartbeat in time, I'd be like, oh God, G.I. Joe cartoon. And it wasn't, But when the first thing I remember was the miniseries that came on after we all got out of school. Is it the Weather Dominator? Was that the
Weather Dominator is the second miniseries, which is September of '84. The first miniseries with the mass device is September of '83.
Okay, I remember both those things. I just didn't remember which order they were in, and it was just so incredible to me. I mean, also at this time, I'm looking at Don Bluth's animation on Dragon's Lair, the video game, at a 7-Eleven at the corner. It was too expensive for me to play, but you could stand there and, drink a big gulp and flip through Savage Sword of Conan while other kids were playing Dragon's Lair. And I was so knocked out by Don Bluth's artwork. At the time, I didn't know his name. He's one of my favorite creators of all time now. But so all that animation and the artwork. And when I was younger in the 70s, before G.I. Joe came around, there was a time period where I would have migraine headaches. I've since grown out of it, but they were bad. And I'd have to stay home from school. And it was so bad that I couldn't watch TV because food ads for like McDonald's or something would make me sick to my stomach. I don't know how or why exactly that happened, but I'd get nauseous. So I couldn't watch TV. So my mom would buy me comic books when I was at home sick. And my favorite ones were GI Combat. So I was already primed for combat comics. I mean, that was a big part of things as well.
Did you have a comic book store in town, or did you later move to a place that had one, or did you find one?
I didn't have a comic book store until the 80s, or until 88. So everything I got pre-88 was off the racks at a drugstore or a corner store.
And this comic book store, did you move? Did you find one? Did it open?
Yes, we moved to San Marcos, Texas. And there were, I believe, 2 comic book stores there. And I mean, one of them was really shady. I mean, it was a shed. It was just a storage shed behind this guy's house. And he just had boxes of comic books in there. And eventually he started picking up new comic books and selling them to us. But he had so many old comic books. And that's really when I started getting open up to all of my favorite artists. And seeing stuff and thinking it was weird at first, and then being like, no, wait a minute, this isn't weird. This guy's a genius. You know, I mean, like I remember seeing Mike Mignola's some of his early stuff. Not Rocket Raccoon. This was not that early. This was a little bit later when he was sort of getting into his becoming who we know him as, when he was becoming the original creature that he became. And I remember seeing a Thor story, I think it was, and thinking, this is weird. I really like this. You know, yeah.
So did you, in terms of G.I. Joe, did you start with issue 1 and just keep on going? And how long did you follow the comic book?
The first Joe book that I got at a Toys R Us, and it was a graphic novel, but it was magazine sized. It was like an oversized, square bound, had a cardboard cardstock cover with Grunt on the cover with his M16 and a giant robot in the background. And I think that's the first, maybe the second 2 issues. I don't know. I'm not sure. You guys would know better than I would.
I think mine's over there. I'm tempted to go grab it.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave it.
That's with the beautiful Earl Norem.
Norem's painting. Yeah.
Yeah. So this was an imprint at Marvel Comics called Marvel Books. And fans who don't know these for the comic book reprints would know them for the coloring books, like Transformers and G.I. Joe coloring books.
I had the coloring books too before I had that Joe whatever it is, Treasury, that book we were just talking about with the Norm cover painting. So so if I was home with, you know, not feeling good, and Mom would bring a Joe coloring book that I thought was incredible.
That's amazing. And Tim's going.
Yeah, that's it. That knocked me out. Now I had the opportunity to get a couple of Joes or one Joe in that book. And so I got one G.I. Joe and I got that book. That was what I got at Toys R Us.
Okay. So just to give you a size comparison, viewers and listeners, This is a little bit bigger than this random issue of Deathstroke that it just happens to be sitting next to my computer, and this has
Yeah.
these issues, and it's all been, has it all been recolored? I think it's all been recolored because the I'd have to check. Maybe not. Anyway, here we go.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things about that is that they've redrawn the cover to, I think it's issue 4, where Hawk randomly had a beret on, and they've taken the beret off.
Yeah,
that's
this
on
has
the inside
issues,
front cover.
Oh yeah. Whoops. This has issues 6 and 7 and 3, I think. Yes. Anyway.
Yeah, I always seem to be wrong when I'm trying to explain to other Joe comic fans the story. I think so it is 6, 7, and 3.
Yeah.
That's what always hangs me up, I guess.
Well, what you might be confusing it because you used the term Treasury Edition, and there was that oversized reprint of issue 1 in the 70s, 80s DC Marvel Treasury Edition size. That is another object that one might have bought around 82, 83.
Okay, so I don't have that book anymore, and I don't want to put you guys on the spot too much, but I have this vivid memory of Flash getting swept away through some sort of a gutter system and using his laser rifle to brace himself against the current that is sweeping him away. And I never can seem to find the book that thing happened in, but I don't think it's the giant robot one, but it may be.
Mark, you're really good at remembering very specific scenes from the first 10 or 150 issues of G.I. Joe. Does that ring a bell?
I can't put my finger on it at the moment, but I can have a think. And
I feel like I'm 10 years old again, and we're on the playground, and I'm trying to explain this.
I do know. I do recall seeing. I think I was checking yojoe.com. I think a couple panels in this reprint were slightly censored. Like there's this panel that just has the sound effect repeated over and over.
Yeah.
And in the original and in the Tales of G.I. Joe reprint, I think you actually see some people getting shot. But let's as much as I want to talk about this one beautiful object. So where in your list of 10 favorite comics did you rank G.I. Joe?
Well, my number one favorite comic, the top 2 slots they're always jockeying for position. It depends on what my mood is, but over the years it hadn't changed. One of them's going to be number 1 and one of them's going to be number 2, and that's 21 Silent Interlude and G.I. Joe Annual number 2 by Michael Golden with the train and the eels, and that is those 2 books are probably the most influential comic book work on my young life. And then going from there into Michael Golden's Fifth to the First. This is what he did before he did the Nam. This was the Vietnam stuff that he did for Larry Hama's book Savage Tales in 1985. So that oversized black and white magazine, I used to Xerox Golden's black and white pages and color them, and just studied the lines over and over and over. And I like John Buscema's Conan stuff. But generally speaking, almost everything that I work on that's mine, for me, my stories, might as well be G.I. Joe stories. I mean, it's I'm a G.I. Joe dork. That's all there is to it. So, I mean, even if I'm doing a story set in 1932, you could just say, well, this was the precursor to the Joes, you know?
Mark, you have this very interesting social media post on screen right now. What do you want to ask Matt about these artists?
Yeah, so you sort of singled out Michael Golden as one of your inspirations, and this specific cover is an interesting one, issue 36, with this asp and the whale, because you might not know this, but it's actually drawn. It's on different layers of acetate or something similar.
Correct.
So that actually it functions almost like as animations, with all of these different things existing in different panes.
Right.
And looking at this sort of struck me as an inspiration that's absolutely what we see from your art, this treatment of silhouette, but a bit broader than that, the different sort of panes of color sort of, and that color transition, very similar to kind of the sort of types of styles that are employed here on this particular issue.
Yeah, you guys, this is one of the this is one of the areas where you guys just zeroed right in. Actually, well, okay, I won't go. I'll stick to this for now. Yeah, this is probably my favorite Joe cover, and what the things that I like to try to do are pretty much encapsulated in this cover. This is a time period when Golden's work looked like it had come from an animation cell from a film that did not exist. And he's probably got 50 of these for you know, there's some Savage Sword of Conan stuff, Crystar, several other US1, I think, was another title that he would do some stuff like this with. And then the Joe annual stuff, if you've ever seen the original artwork for the Joe annuals, they're done with the same way, with that overlay where it looks like he's painting on an animation.
Yeah, the cover to yearbook 1 and the back cover to yearbook 2. Cover to yearbook 2 has Cobra Command and that green
That's
marble background.
That's it. Yeah. So that the mixed with my rabid need to see a G.I. Joe cartoon that wasn't coming, and my fascination with those Laserdisc video games that I saw in arcades in the early 80s, Don Bluth's Dragon Slayer. At the time, I didn't know Don Bluth was an ex-Disney guy, but I had seen The Secret of Nim, which is still one of my favorite movies of all time. I love that movie. I love Don Bluth. And there were other video games at the time when he found that success with that Laserdisc series. Somebody took Castle of Cagliostro and made it into an American video Laserdisc game called Cliff Jumper, where they just took sections of the movie Castle of Cagliostro with Lupin III and made a video game out of that. And so again, you're in an arcade as a 10-year-old, like, what is this? This is incredible. And I really hadn't been exposed to much anime aside from G-Force. When the Americans got the rights to take Gatchaman and turn it into G-Force and bring it to America with slightly different music and change the... You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, Battle of the Planets.
Battle of the Planets, yeah. And Star Blazers. And I moved around a bunch as a kid, so I couldn't always see those shows. Like, if one would come on, be like, this is incredible. Like the opening to G-Force or the opening to Battle of the Planets, I was running around the house losing my mind. I mean, the music, you know, I'm losing my mind. It's like I would do the same thing when SWAT, the TV show, would come on. I'd lose my mind to the opening theme song of SWAT. I'd lose my mind to the opening of the $6 Million Man. Like, I would always get very reverent and very serious during the opening of the $6 Million Man. I still do. You know, the wreckage, you know, the whole accident, you know, it was so dramatic to me as a kid.
So, Matt, this issue that we're looking at right now comes out in, must be 85.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, you're 12.
Mm-hmm.
So when are you starting to get more serious about art, and what are you doing to get more serious about art? Because at the beginning, or just before we hit record, you said you were not trained as an artist.
Mm-mm. I just enjoyed drawing, and I had a hand at it. I equate it to this, and I don't know. People might not agree, but I played Little League Baseball, and I had good eye-hand coordination. Like there was a stretch of time there where I really enjoyed playing second base and shortstop. Like great time. Could put the ball where I wanted it. And I seem to have the same ability to put the pencil tip where I wanted it. To me, what I do is all eye-hand coordination. Aside from the ability to see the movie in your mind, like the take a snapshot of the film in your mind and translate that to the page or whatever medium. I'm strictly digital now, but I resisted digital illustration for until probably 2006 or 7. Like I was real snooty about traditional artwork.
Okay, so as you get all right, so you leave high school, and this is a stage where some people
wait a minute.
might go to art school or like get a job or
Yeah.
have been like the one art person in their high school class. So
Yeah.
where do you go?
Okay, so 12 when this came out, I would have picked this up at 7-Eleven. And I would have picked up with all my Savage Sword of Conan comics, would have picked up Savage Tales at that same 7-Eleven. And that had Michael Golden's The Nom. And that was this year. This was 85. And I consider, well, it wasn't The Nom. It wasn't called The Nom yet. It was the fifth to the first.
Yeah, these are these two short stories in this.
3. Yeah.
Okay, these like proto-nom black and white stories that were in this short-lived magazine that Larry Hama edited.
Yeah, and that was a graduation for me to, okay, I haven't seen artwork this amazing ever. Like I wasn't familiar with Russ Heath's work as I am now. Heath is a hero of mine. The work he did on the DC combat titles is incredible. But that fifth to the first work, I was completely infatuated by it. That mixed with G.I. Joe Yearbook 2. So now I'm zeroing in on Golden, and he's making everybody else look dumb. Like in my book, he's like it's like everybody else is just farting around with muscle men and spandex. Golden is killing it with this, and now that's not true. That you're hearing the voice of a 12 or a 13-year-old. So I don't feel that way anymore. But on top of that, it was a very mature title. Guys are smoking dope in that. Guys are getting their faces blown off. I mean, it had to be in black and white. If it would have been in color, it would have been so gruesome that it would have been like watching Platoon or Apocalypse Now. It was incredible and shocking and burned itself into me. So I go from there. Then we moved from Tulsa to a little town in Arkansas, and there was one drugstore there that had comic books, and they didn't carry G.I. Joe. They didn't carry Savage Sword of Conan. They didn't carry any of my books, but they did carry. Okay, wait a minute. I need to go back a little bit. The Hellfire Club. When the X-Men Hellfire Club book came out, there was a collection of John Byrne's Hellfire Club stories. At some point, I got my hands on one of those, and that was incredible. John Byrne's artwork knocked me out. Before that, the only books that I was following monthly was Savage Sword of Conan, and those stories don't bleed from one issue into the next. They're all completely different, not associated with one another. The Joe comic was the first one where the next comic probably has something to do with the one that came out before it. And when I'm in Arkansas at that drugstore, I remember picking up X-Men Fantastic Four with John Bogdanovich, his artwork. And
Bogdanov,
yeah, not Bogdanovich. I'm thinking I'm a movie director. Yeah, Bogdanov. And I thought it was incredible. And I was 13 or 14, and I waited eagerly for the next month to get the next issue. And that artwork, that was when I started emulating, trying to copy his drawings. I started that mixed with my infatuation with the Joes. I started drawing cartoony, like Navy SEALs or Recon Marines or Green Berets. Like I'd go to an Army Navy store and see a T-shirt with a Navy SEAL in a rubber boat stacked full of all these weapons and grenades and stuff, and it's kind of cartoony looking, something that a SEAL might buy. And I started doing drawings like those. And at this time, I was really trying to figure out if I was going to do wildlife illustration or comic book stuff, because I think this was the year I found White Fang. I found it later than most people do, and it's still my favorite book. I know that may mean I'm not very sophisticated, but White Fang is my favorite book. And so I went back to drawing wolves, tigers and lions and sharks. And then so from there, 14, so then moved to San Marcos, Texas. Now I have a comic book store, and that's when everything changed. Now I've got a comic book store. Now I can get my hands on all kinds of stuff. I was really into Epic magazine, reprints of Epic magazine with all the painted stuff, and I think it was Epic. Like Marvel, let's see, what was the Heavy Metal? You remember those books from the late 70s, early 80s? There was Heavy Metal, Epic Illustrated, right? Was one of them. Yeah. So now I'm seeing Barry Windsor Smith's painted stuff, and I'm seeing all kinds of people's work in those books, and really, really just starts to blow me away. And when I moved to San Marcos, okay, my dad was a pro football player. I'm a big dude, okay? And when I moved to San Marcos, I had been playing basketball in Arkansas. When I came to San Marcos, they had a football team. And there was an ex-pro football coach, was the coach of the football team. And he finds out that my dad was a pro ball player, and he's like, "We want you to play on the football team." And I did that for a couple of years. My heart wasn't in it. Baseball was where my heart was. But I also had taken some artwork with me to the school and qualified for advanced art. Like, this was a bigger school that I was in now. And the artist had seen my artwork, and he's like, "Yeah, you qualify for advanced art. You shouldn't, you go right to the top with as far as your access to these courses." And so, yeah, I was basically one of those guys for like 3 or 4 years in my high school that could just draw cool shit and make new friends by drawing things. I moved around so much. Most of what the artwork that I would do would really help me make friends. I mean, that was a huge part of it. And making friends laugh and drawing crazy things. And, I'm probably talking too much.
So jump back, because before we hit record, you also mentioned that issue 21, Silent Interlude, was a big influence, but that would have come out before you moved to where there was this comic store. So you got that at the drugstore too?
Yeah, multiple issues. Yeah, multiple issues of that book. The cover fell off. The first one I had.
Okay.
Yeah,
because you were looking at it so much.
And I was drawing pictures from it. I mean, I was copying that as a very young man, like that. I don't know, 11 or 12. 10, 11 or 12, somewhere around in there. And I still have multiple copies of that book. I mean, I have multiple copies of Annual 2 with Golden Story in it. I've got them stashed in my truck for when I'm stuck in traffic. I can go into the glove box and open that up. I've got them in hiking gear, like backpacks that have survival shit in my backpack, and that comic book and White Fang are in that backpack. I've got them stashed all over the house.
Okay. So it's all right. So you finish high school and you need to get a job. So comics?
Oh, let's see, Taco Bell, I think. Taco Bell, McDonald's. I worked at the coolest job I had back then was at a movie theater. Where I was like projectionist assistant, sort of. Friend of mine was the projectionist, but I would help him out with stuff and do concession stand stuff. And I think my first, I did a piece of artwork for a grocery store in San Marcos. Got like paid $25 to do like a Chester Cheetos display. First professional job.
Is this you doing the original, or is this something for reproduction?
No, this was just some guy whose daughter went to school with me, and he was a manager at the grocery store. And he was like, she was in my art class, and he was like, "You're really good. Would you do this display for Chester Cheetah?"
So your original art is what's actually sort of
That's correct.
Sticking up around some bags of chips at the.
That's
Okay,
correct.
it's not like they put your drawing on a
No,
shirt
no,
or a bag
not
or
at
a
all.
poster. Okay.
No, this is $25.
Okay, so when are you like going to conventions or finding editors?
Okay, so and then after the Chester Cheetah, I painted a comic book store sign. Painted a plywood sign out in front of a comic book store. The guy that had the shack out behind his house hired me to do a Spider-Man on a flagpole out in front of his house. So I did that one. And then then I moved to here's a funny thing in this time period. Mom won't like this, but whatever. It's how things go. So I got into a little bit of trouble in high school for cutting class, and got 2 weeks in-house detention. Now this is like you guys know what in-house detention is? So you're not allowed to go to class. They put all the hoods in one room with cubicles around them. And like one of the football coaches is in charge of monitoring you all day. And you get your homework assignments at the start of the week on a Monday, and you have to turn them all in by Friday. And so you have your books, but you're in this cubicle. You can't see the other hoods that you're in the class with. The other guys are cutting class or sneaking beer into school. So you're cut off. And you've got like one of the hard-ass football coaches is in there making sure nobody is up to any shenanigans, that everybody's got their head down, they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. So the cool thing was I grew more as an artist in that 2-week detention period than I did ever in my life, because the coach came in, gave us all of our assignments from all of our teachers, gave them to us on a Monday, and he said to us, "You guys complete these, you can screw off the whole rest of the week." So I would complete all my work on that Monday for the whole week, and then have 4 days of 8 hours of sitting alone in this cubicle with my comic books, copying panels from comic books. And the exercise that I gave myself was, you've got to draw one thing from every page in this comic. Doesn't matter what it is, you can't skip a page, but you got to reproduce one thing from every page of this comic. It was like an assignment that I gave myself, because I didn't get any assignments from my art teacher. At the time, I was in Advanced Art 4, the most advanced art course that the high school had. So I was getting assignments from everybody but Mr. Harrington. So I gave myself the assignment that you have to draw one thing from every page in this comic book. And that was the whirlwind, basically. That was when things really started to come together. It was like, I don't want to draw. I don't give a shit about drawing fire hydrants. Well, draw the fire hydrant. You're gonna have to know how to draw a fire hydrant. So draw the fire hydrant. And you can't just go through this whole thing and draw Booby Girl. You can't pick her out on every page and draw her. You need to draw a car or a building or something. And that was I grew so much during that time period. So. Unfortunately moved at the end of my junior year to a brand new school in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, my senior year. That's a drag, moving your senior year in with a bunch of strangers. But I, again, qualified for the advanced art courses that they had there, and started drawing my own comic books. and then started taking them around to shops and meeting other comic book artists, guys that were local that wanted to produce their own work. Did a couple of black and white things for them. Went to some conventions. Bumped into the editors at Malibu. At the time, R.A. Jones was also living in Tulsa, Oklahoma. He saw some of my work at a comic book store, asked if me to put some pages together, introduced me to some of the editors from Malibu because he was working for Malibu at the time. I did AIRMAN. You guys let that cat out of the bag, so now everybody's going to know what a chump I was because that book looks awful, but that's the way it goes. At the time, I was not doing what I'm doing now. I was trying to do some combination of Simon Bisley, Todd McFarlane, Silvestri, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, that stuff that looks ridiculous. And not theirs. Their stuff looked good. Mine looked ridiculous. I hadn't found my own voice as an artist yet, So I do that stuff and did the book in Malibu. And then there's like a stretch of time where I didn't do comic book stuff. I was doing other stuff. So
Other art stuff?
Some. So ended up working at the steel mill. Still doing drawings, but a full day's work at the steel mill, you don't have any juice at all to do artwork when you get home. Like there's just nothing there. And then I fell in love with a chick, split, came back to San Marcos, Texas, was still doing artwork, ended up getting a job at a graphics company. And so now I'm 19, 20, and basically stayed doing graphics for 14 years. I mean, like there was some other comic book stuff in between, but I spent 14 years working with a graphic program, integrating my traditional artwork with Illustrator and Photoshop, learning how to use those programs. And boring.
Well, I want to zoom in one little bit there. All right. So 14 years at this graphics house, were you doing logos for local businesses? Were you doing ad campaigns? Were you doing layouts for catalogs?
Yeah, sure. All the above.
And this isn't web design. This is like a decade before that, right?
No, this is traditional. Yeah, this is not web design.
Okay, so you have an X-Acto and you were using rubber cement and you're making like negatives of things and you're using like Rubylith film, right?
Okay, yes, all that stuff was there, but I was just after that time, basically.
Okay. Because there were computers. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
But not website design.
No, not at all.
Okay.
And so
so what's the thing that starts your sort of modern career in comics? Who do you meet, or where do you go, or who sees what of yours?
Okay, 9/11 happens, and it was I'm living in a shoebox apartment. I mean, I'm living in an apartment. I'm trying to express how small this apartment was. It was an extremely small apartment. And I'm alone, and 9/11 happens, and that hit us all psychologically pretty hard, and it really lit a fire under me as far as, okay, what do you want to do creatively? I mean, you've got what it takes. What do you want to do? Like it, I shifted my focus from wanting to be like, how will I be good enough to draw the X-Men, and who's going to see me so that I could draw Wolverine or Conan, and shifted to what would I really like to do? And I was a G.I. Joe fanatic, and I was Nick Fury fanatic. And I was like, I want to do a story And so I started putting together a story, the Vic Falcon story, which is just all the Johnny Quest, Indiana Jones, G.I. Joe. I wanted it to feel like that, and I wanted to have the animation influences of Don Bluth. And 9/11 happens. People are dying. Couples are holding hands and jumping off the top of a burning building, and we're watching them. It was very sobering. And I was like, well, if life's not guaranteed, I need to get on the stick with this. What is it that I want to do? And would it bring something better out of me, out of my work? And so I focused really heavily on Vic Falcon. I'm trying to remember, was there something before this? That's really old Vic Falcon stuff there. The previous picture you had up was the polished stuff. Go ahead.
It was just talking about the timing of 2001 and that being the kick up the ass to kind of refocus on comics. In terms of G.I. Joe at that time, it was being relaunched by Image / Devil's Due Productions. Was that on your radar at that point in time as well?
No. All of my Joe memories were burned into me before I was 14 or 15. Seared into me. My characters were like the first 4 waves of guys. Like, those are my guys. Like, I don't really know the guys after I think Flint was in my last wave of my Joes. I think that's wave 5. I remember Beachhead just because my little brother had Beachhead and I thought he was cool. Beyond that, I had started shifting into Run DMC, Golden Age hip hop, and like actual throwing stars and nunchucks and butterfly knives, and I was drifting away from the toys and getting into more dirt bikes and switchblade combs and martial arts movies.
So Matt,
So even by the fifth issue, the fifth year or so of the G.I. Joe comic, you're kind of beginning to kind of stray away from that, of all of the less exciting, less your era. I want
to jump on that Vic Falcon collage for a moment. So, Matt,
yeah,
what is the format of Vic Falcon? Was it a pitch? Did you publish it? Who saw it?
It was going to happen. It was happening. I had an investor, and I contacted Larry Hama because I wanted Larry to work on the project with me. I contacted Howard Mackey, and I contacted them both at the same time. Both of them were flown out to Dallas. I drove out to Dallas to meet with those guys. Really funny story, getting to meet your hero, Larry Hama. So I walk into the hotel. Larry's there. I had talked to him the night before on the phone. We'd had a few phone meetings. And he said, I've got a buddy of mine out there around Dallas, the character I based Wild Bill on. There might be a day where I have to step away and go say hey to my ace because he's out there. I was like, okay. And that the next day, that Saturday, I said to Larry that next morning, I've got this really cool Army-Navy shop. It's my favorite Army-Navy surplus shop in Dallas. It's called Omaha's. There it is. You got the picture. Yeah. And I said, I really want to take you there. I want you to see this place. And I said, but I didn't know if you were going to go see Wild Bill today. And he said, Wild Bill's not out here. I just tell that to guys in case you all turn out to be assholes and I need to get paid. So that was really because I bought it hook, line, and sinker. I was like, Wild Bill, wow. Yeah, so we went to the surplus store. Picked up gear in there. I get to go through a surplus store with my fucking hero. My hero, Larry Hama, and look at surplus gear. And I'm picking gear up because I'm a gear hound. I mean, I love vintage surplus gear. And I buy basically 2 of everything so that I got one and my wife has one. And I get to these heavy duty field medical supply section, like with these really serious, huge gauze pads for serious bullet wounds. And Larry's like, it's impressive that they've got these here. I was like, yeah, I better get one. He goes, no, you better get two. And because I'd been picking up two of everything else. And I said, oh, yeah, one for me, one for my wife. He goes, no, one for the entrance wound, one for the exit wound. I was like, whoa. So, you know, I'm hanging out with Larry in a surplus store getting all this cool inside baseball. You know, he was talking to me about the long range reconnaissance patrol guys. We were talking about gear. And I said to him, you know, and all, because I studied Vietnam stuff, I was like, I see pictures of these guys. They got 4 canteens on them. And Larry was like, yeah, not only that, they're all topped off all the way to the top so they don't slosh whatsoever in the field. Yeah, they got 4 of them and they're topped all the way off. And when you go to drink out of that canteen, you empty the whole canteen and you don't drink again until you absolutely have to have a drink, because you don't want anything sloshing around in a canteen in the field. So I'm hearing all this cool stuff, you know, I'm loving this stuff. And so I start putting this stuff together. What I didn't understand at the time was Larry took the idea, liked the ideas of Vic Falcon, but I had plots and stuff laid out, stories. But Larry's his own man. He does his own thing. And he would have done that for Vic Falcon. And I would have loved for him to do that for Vic Falcon. But I ended up at a convention with this Vic Falcon stuff, several pages laid out on a table. Howard Shakin comes along, asked me, where's the coffee? And I said, it was before a show on a Saturday. I said, it's this way. Come on, I'll show you where it is. And we were walking back past my table. And I said, this is my stuff. He stopped there. He says, my God, you don't entirely suck. And, started looking at the pages, and he said, listen, just before the show starts, come down and sit with me, okay, and bring your digital pad with your artwork on it. And I sat down there with Howard, and he got all my information. And although Ruff and Reddy is no Vic Falcon, and it is not the Mercenary Sea, I totally skipped the Mercenary Sea stuff. I shouldn't have done that. But yeah, he pulls me in on the Ruff and Reddy project. The Mercenary Sea thing came from some pretty heavy online publication.
Wait, can I hit a pause? I think okay. So Vic Falcon is before Mercenary Sea.
It's after.
Okay.
But
All right. Mercenary Sea is published in 2014.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Vic Falcon was born on 9/11. I started putting that story together. My baby is Vic Falcon. I started putting that together after the towers came down.
Okay.
And yeah, so eventually, so right before the last Jones movie came out, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I started doing these silhouette pieces of Jones. They were just one-offs, and they were on DeviantArt. And pretty quickly, it shot up to like the #1 liked Indiana. Well, there's one. Yeah, that was done later, but yeah, that's what I was doing. And it shot up to the most popular Indiana Jones fan art on DeviantArt. And somebody in some publication, I can't remember who it was. It might have been Kotaku. I could be wrong, Captain. But did an article on my Indiana Jones art and just said, this guy draws scenes from an Indiana Jones film that doesn't exist. You've got to see this guy's artwork. And the writer of the Mercenary Sea saw this artwork, and Cal saw the artwork and said, hey man, you want to work on a book? Well, let's pitch an image. I was like, yeah, sure. And what he had pitched was like this noir Humphrey Bogart kind of crime horror story. But I didn't know who Kel was at the time. So I said, nah, I'm not really into that, which is stupid because I should have done it. It would have looked great. But I told him about a story I was working on about these World War I veterans that build a boat, an armored boat, and they go to a place like Skull Island to find a treasure and help out these natives like the Magnificent Seven that are being pestered by these pirates. And based on that, he just comes up with the Mercenary Sea, about this crew of rogues on a submarine that are, looking for a lost island and a lost treasure. And this was really fun. There was a big serious transition from my artwork here, though, because in the middle of this series, I got a pad where I could actually draw on the screen. Everything there was like you can, if you go through the Mercenary Sea, you'll see there's a drastic change at some point later in the story. So yeah.
Okay, so the Mercenary Sea runs 8 issues,
Mm-hmm.
and at the end of the series, in the letters page, you and Simmons say, "We're changing our schedule. We'll be back next year with more story, but we can't do a monthly."
Yeah.
I'm under the impression that there are a lot of Image series which launch, like a writer and an artist get something approved at Image, but they have to fund the first couple issues themselves, like pay for the colorist, pay for the
Right.
letterer. Maybe they're also the colorist. But basically, either do it at night, or do it on weekends, or sort of do it with money that they've saved up from their other job. Because at Image, with some exceptions, you don't get paid until issue 3 comes out.
Right.
Because of how the economics of stores ordering, and then the print run is set, and then the issues ship, and then the issues arrive, and then it's the second issue, and then it's the third issue. And so there are many Image series which only go 4 issues or 8 issues or 10 issues. And then the creators take a break, go do something else, and come back. Or it just doesn't sell well enough, and they take a break, and that's it. So will we see more Mercenary Sea?
It's possible. The balls that were dropped by me on the Mercenary Sea. The opportunities that Kel gave me were wonderful. My problem at the time was I was too timid to tell him what I did and did not want to do. And so I began not liking some of what was going on, not being too excited about some of what was going on. And instead of being enough of a man, to be frank, to stand up and say, I don't want to do that. I want to do something else. I want to take this a different direction. I just sort of slowly let it kind of take the wind out of my sails. I mean, there's a very real part of me. And I don't know how many other comic book artists deal with this, but there's a very real part of me that is like a stand-up comedian, and that I need the feedback of the crowd to know when I'm hitting my marks. It sounds very narcissistic and very egotistical, but I need positive feedback from the people that I work with. I need them to say, not just, yeah, cool page. I need them to say, that leopard in that tall grass right there is badass. That really works. Or the shading that you put on his hand up there holding the machete with that kind of it's not a hard line, it's like chalk. It's cool. It looks cool in the crossing it. I need that feedback, or I start to internalize negatively. And it probably says something about the way I'm internally wired. I don't know how many other comic book artists go through this, but when Kel was working with another artist on another project, and this is early on when we started the Mercenary Sea, and he had offhandedly said, "Guy wants me to tell him how great he is all the time." I was like, "Oh, okay, that's too bad. What a dumbass that guy was." Instead of saying, "Well, do you give him positive feedback?" But I would love to work on the Mercenary Sea again with Kel. Kel was more mature than I was. If I would have not been as subordinate as I felt, because I did feel in a very subordinate role, and I would have stepped up and said, "No, let's do something else," or "I ain't impressed with that," because I was on an Image book, was on a one of the top 3 American comic book publishers. I didn't know if I was on shaky ground. Kel made the whole thing happen, and not only did he make it happen, we had a small page rate, which is almost unheard of at Image. But the sales didn't end up being where they needed to be. I was late on some issues. Part of it had to do with the fact that the working methods that I were using took so long. Things changed when I could actually draw directly on the screen with a stylus. This is what you see that I do is digital painting. You were trying to explain in the last show, Reynolds doesn't put a black line around something and drop color into it. No, it's essentially it's a painting. I'm painting these things. Is the best way to describe it. But I was still learning how to do all that stuff. But Kel actually, he came to me. Some months had gone by. I'd picked some other paying work elsewhere, and he said, and I put together these really good pages for the next issue of Merc Sea. And he said, I got bad news for you, man. I don't think there's going to be any page rates. Like, they're going to publish it. There's not going to be any more page rates. And unfortunately, instead of just running with it and saying, okay, well, we'll see if I can get us back afloat on this thing, what I said was, that's unfortunate. I'm going to have to find paying work elsewhere. And that's where it stopped. And I feel kind of bad or irresponsible. I mean, it's actually not even that bad. What happened, what went down's not even that bad. It's just that I do have a great fondness for the Mercenary Sea. And
Okay.
Go ahead.
And then, all right, so Mercenary Sea is 2014 and Ruff and Reddy is 2017.
Yeah.
So that story you told, the story you told about you and Shaken at a convention, that happens after.
Yes. So 2015, 2016, I've got somebody willing to invest in trying to push Vic Falcon as some sort of an IP. Like how we can push it. We can publish it, see if we can get a script or take it to possibly television or animation or something. And during that time period, Larry and I meet and hang out and talk about stuff, and I begin putting those images together, pouring a lot. And at the same time, I'm working at a fire and safety company in San Marcos. I leave the graphics company. So I'm working fire and safety and doing the Vic Falcon stuff.
Okay, wait, you left the graphics company. Were you doing Mercenary Sea while you had a day job?
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. And then earlier when you mentioned this Vic Falcon story, you said Howard Mackey, who's a comics writer, wrote a bunch of stuff at Marvel, right? It's known for Ghost Rider.
Yeah.
And Web of Spider-Man. Am I remembering that right? He and Hama flew to Texas. How did Mackey get involved? What was he going to do that Hama wasn't going to do, or how was that going to work? Or were you hoping one of them would sort of knock the other out?
No, it was I'd gone to a convention, been invited to a handful of conventions because of the Mercenary Sea stuff. And he was at a show and we just hit it off. I thought it'd be really fun to work with him on the Vic Falcon stuff. And then I had contacted Hama on Facebook or I believe that's the platform. And when the investor went in on the thing, it was like, yeah. And I said, can we get these guys a page rate? Because they'll come in and they'll punch this thing up. I mean, it'll be a blast. He knew who they were. He was like, yeah, sure. So the same day, I didn't know not to do this, but I sent them both the same email on the same day. And not thinking I wouldn't hear from either of them. And Mackey responded immediately, flew to Dallas, hung out, we rapped about it. And then Hama responded 2 or 3 months later, and we flew him out and we rapped about it. So what Vic Falcon was going to be an anthology book involving all the characters from Vic Falcon. And it would be like an old issue of GI Combat, where Mackey would have his character in this universe that would be 6 or 7 pages per month, and Larry would have his character in this universe that would be 6 or 7 pages per month, and I'd have the meat would be Vic and his amigos, you know.
Okay. I'm sensing that you are very lightly describing the investor because this project didn't go forward. And so I'm not asking for any details or inside information, but can you tell us in a very general sense how did an investor find you, and what was the scale of this beyond an anthology comic? Because I can't think of a lot of investors who are like, I want to publish a comic because comics make a lot of money.
So
So how did you find this person? How'd they find you?
he was at a comic book shop that I was invited to in Dallas Fort Worth. He was a comic book fanatic. We were basically the same age. He loved the Mercenary Sea. I mean, he was like, he just loved that style. The G.I. Joe, G.I. Combat, like, these aren't superheroes. They don't have any special powers. These are human beings that love one another, that are relying on each other in really hard situations to survive and get out of this situation. So they have a real strong sense of family and survival.
And was the plan just a comic? Was it going to be, like, oh, we'll do a movie, we'll do a show, we'll do toys?
The plan was to push it toys. The plan was to push it as far as it could be pushed.
Okay.
I mean, initially,
when
we first sat down for our first meal, he said, would you like to do a Johnny Quest comic book? Because, like me, he was a Johnny Quest fanatic. I was like, yes, but Warner Brothers had Johnny at the time, so that was not something we could do. And then I said, well, yeah, there's Johnny Quest stuff. And then I said, what about Land of the Lost IP? He and I were both virtually the same age. We grew up in the 70s and 80s, so we grew up liking all the same stuff. We both loved Land of the Lost. So the idea of getting a license to do Land of the Lost IP, only it wouldn't be Marshall, Will, and Holly. They would be gone, or it would be something that happened before they got there. Let's do it with a team of Green Berets in Vietnam that get swept down a river and end up in the Land of the Lost. But they're all Green Berets. And he was like, this is fun. Let's do that, So
okay. And then who had connections to take this further than a comic? Did anyone have connections to take this?
Yeah. I mean, there were the guy that owned the comic book shop was savvy. He'd done his own stuff. You're a comic shop guy. You understand more than the average Joe about how some of these things work. And since then, I have gotten into that world more, like where, initially, here's the thing. The guy just had a little bread, and he dearly loved comics, and he dearly loved combat and adventure comics. We were just cut from the same strip. I mean, basically at the same time Joe stopped mattering to him and Run DMC started mattering to him more, was basically the same time I started getting into, Run DMC and more into girls and sports and that kind of stuff. We had many of the same memories and the same nostalgic love for things that we hadn't seen. I mean, it's like even DC. So I don't want to bitch and moan too much here, but DC Comics has a legacy of combat comic book characters. It's insane. The stable of legacy characters that they have, the glorious history of combat comics, and they used to be on top. DC in the 70s, they were on top. G.I. Combat, all their non-superhero related books, Gravedigger, Kana the Ninja, The Mercenaries, Weird War, many other, and they don't do anything with them. We wanted to try to revive that spirit of G.I. Joe and Johnny Quest. And,
Matt, so how much of Vic Falcon exists? How many sample pages did you do? Did Hama or Mackie write anything? How much did you produce?
I produced a lot of artwork, and I've got the first quote movie, like the first adventure that would probably be I don't know, you can condense these things. I would say it would be it'd hustle along as a 4-issue miniseries, but today it would probably be published as a 6 or an 8-issue series.
So you have many issues done?
No, not done. Written.
Okay,
but
written. Okay.
Characters designed and things like that. I was in the middle of working on that stuff. Larry was basically, and I don't know who else he does this for. I was just very fortunate. But Larry was I would just send him stuff every week that I was working on. And he would just be like, neato. I mean, he wasn't writing anything. He was just being my buddy. He was being the father of G.I. Joe. This is like me getting to work with Marlon Brando or Steven Spielberg for some people. I mean, this literally would be like me putting work together, sending it to Steven Spielberg, and Steven going, neato, or put some running lights on those boats. You see pictures of them at night. You see those running lights. So put a blue and a green and a red running light on that boat. Put some haze and make it pop. I mean, it was just fun. It was like he was like just being my buddy. I mean. Okay,
so Chaykin sees your stuff and wants you to get published by Marvel or DC, by the big guys.
He says this is great, but you're not going to go anywhere until you go to the majors. People are going to have to know your name, or you're not. It's just going to lay there. Nobody's going to care.
Okay, so DC around 2016 does some Hanna-Barbera related projects, and so it's these modern revisions like Flintstones and
Wacky
Racers, and Johnny Quest, and this one, Ruff and Reddy. Were you familiar with it, and what was your sense of? Was it sort of like anything to work for the majors, or were you like, hey, something different, or were you like, hey, this is off brand for me? Because this is such the DC Hanna-Barbera work from around 2016 is this very interesting, sort of forgotten slice of publishing, which has not been followed up on. So how did you feel sort of getting cast here?
Well, one, Howard embraced me. Like, he was like, look, you got something here. I see your love. You've got something here. I got to get you in to meet these people at DC. And I'm going to act as your rabbi, which was his quote. I'm going to act as your rabbi on this. And I was like, okay. And he was like, they want to do this Ruff and Reddy thing. And I want to do like this historical take on history and satirical. And I don't know if you guys know this, but as far as all those Hanna-Barbera titles go, this one, Ruff and Reddy, the Ruff and Reddy Show, is not like the other ones. This is a wild story. It's crummy and pissy and political and
sounds like Chaykin.
Yeah,
I mean that as a compliment.
I know. Ugly and human and flawed individuals, and we dance through, from the 1940s and 50s all the way. It's a trip through time of the entertainment industry, film, television, with these characters. Okay, so one, when he said, "You want to work with me on this?" I just immediately said yes, because Howard's my rabbi, and it's DC. And he said, "You need to go to the majors if you want anybody to see Vic." So I was like, okay. Two, there's a lot of vintage historical stuff going on in this. So I get to draw cool suits from the 50s and 60s. I get to draw old cars. I get to draw older buildings. And, cop interrogation rooms. And I was going to be able to do stuff that I liked to do. Three, I'm a Don Bluth fanatic. I love animation. I love traditional animation. So it was like, I love the spirit of this. I can figure this out. I'll figure it out.
But you would I would point out that there is a big difference between Bluth at his own studio and Bluth at Disney feature quality full animation and the budget limited flat TV animation that Hanna-Barbera was making in the 60s and 70s.
You're absolutely right.
But you're pulling the part of it, like the good design. You're pulling the one part of it out of it that you can make your own, and then because it's shaken, you can run with it.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. I mean, I love. Okay, well, what you just addressed is very, very true, and as far as where it lives in my heart, yes. There's a huge difference between watching The Secret of Nim or The Jungle Book and watching Scooby-Doo. But there's still a part of me that is very much in love with Alex Toth's design work on many of those cartoons, or Doug Wildey's work on Johnny Quest. I have a deep love for it. And my stuff was not going to be moving, so it wasn't actually going to be the endless nightmare of doing actual animation. I could just pretend like they were snapshots from an animated feature,
Okay, so Shaken does the regular covers and you do the variant covers. Mark, do I have that right?
That's right.
Okay, so did this book make a splash? Did it get you what Shaken wanted?
It did because okay, so now we're getting into the modern era. So he introduces me over there. Everybody's calling me Mac. I'm just running with it. Yeah, yes, it's Mac. And Chiarello was the art director.
That's Mark Chiarello, who comics fans will know for occasionally drawing or painting basically Batman stories or covers, but mostly known as an editor. And then when he was promoted, art director at DC. Yeah,
and he did some old Wolverine stuff and some stuff at Marvel early in the game. He also had a very unique style that was influential on me. But he hits me up and he says, while we're waiting for all this Ruff and Reddy crap to happen, you want to do a Space Ghost cover? And I was like, yeah. And he was just really enthusiastic. And so, I put together the Space Ghost thing, and he's just a big kid. He's a lot like Larry. It's like I could send him something and his first reaction is, neato, wow. It's and so I send him the Space Ghost roughs that I had, and he goes, cool, isn't this fun? Like that was his official email to the shitbird artist that he didn't know from Adam, and instantly starts treating me like we're buddies on a playground.
All right, one more bit of context for our listeners. So I think that was a good comparison you just made with Hama, because most of us think of Hama as a writer. Of course, he's an artist, but he was an editor, and he was one of the very few editors at Marvel who had drawn comics, right? Yes. We think of a lot of editors are like kind of writers, or they're writers, or they want to be writers. Right. And Chiarello on the DC side is like the one DC editor who draws and paints. And so his sensibility is fine-tuned in a different way from a lot of other editors at DC. And we're recording in 2023. He's no longer there, but he was there for a long time.
Yeah. My trajectory over there was much better when he was there. He had the issue number 1 of the Mercenary Sea blown up into a poster and put on the wall in his office at DC. The picture of the guy climbing up the rock. There's a Japanese scout at the top looking out over the sea with his binoculars. He had that picture blown up and put in his office. I didn't know this until after he left, because we've stayed friends.
Mark, is it that one?
That's it. He had that blown up and put on his wall in the DC office. And he didn't tell me this until like a year and a half after, he got canned. And I was like, wow. He's like, yeah, so your work was actually in the office. Like, people saw this thing, it's like, cool.
Okay. So what happens because of, or after Ruff and Reddy, or you connecting with Chiarello?
Okay. So, I'm finishing up Ruff and Reddy. There's a couple of scenes in the book where I've drawn these vintage cars, and Dan DiDio, who I'm friends with on Facebook, I see a post during Christmas. He said, yeah, just having a couple of bourbons and watching Godzilla. And I happened to be having a couple of bourbons and watching whatever I was watching, and which gave me enough guts to just reach out to him right there on Facebook in an instant message and say, hey, I'm having a couple of bourbons and watching Johnny Quest or whatever. And he instantly just goes, hey, I got this really cool idea. I saw some of the cars you did in the Ruff and Reddy thing. Do you remember the video game Spy Hunter? And I was like, yeah, it's one of my favorite video games of all time. It was like, you want to do a Spy Hunter comic book? I was like, absolutely. And he said, I got one question for you then. Do we make it modern or Cold War? And I said, it's got to be Cold War, man. All the cars look better. All the chicks look cooler. We got to make it vintage guns, choppers, tanks, the whole nine. Make it feel, like a Johnny Quest cartoon mixed with James Bond or something. He's like, okay, cool. When I get back in January after the holidays, we'll hash all this out in the office. And I did a brief pitch for it in text message form right there while we're having our bourbons. And he's like, yeah, I like it. This is cool. When I get back to the office, I'll call you. He gave me a date, whatever it was, January 2nd or 3rd or 4th, whatever it was. And then he just calls me up at the house, and we just start rapping about it. We just start talking about it. And he said, okay, so I got this idea. Warner Brothers has this video game IP from the 80s. We want to do a big push in a year or 2 or 3. We're going to get a bunch of creatives together to do their take on Gen X's favorite video games. Like the games you loved when you were a kid. We want to do a story version of this. We'll put them together as just like this little nostalgia push, and see what we can do. See where it goes. There was Joust. Somebody was going to do something creative with Joust. They were going to give those flying dinosaur rider guys a story to them. I can't remember all the other ones. Like, maybe Zaxxon. I don't know. I can't remember the other games, but they had the rights to them. Warner Brothers had the IP, and so he said, "Okay, so you're going to be handling all the chores on this book." I was like, "Yeah, sure, pencil, ink, and color." And I said, "I'd like Rousseau, the letterer from the Mercenary Sea, to come on because he's my buddy." And he's like, "Okay, you got him." He was like, "So you're writing this thing too?" And I said, "Well, maybe we should bring a pro in to make sure it's not retarded." And he laughed really hard. And he said, "Okay, I understand what you're saying. I probably should have just written it." But he said, "Who do you want?" And I said, "Larry Hama." And he said, "If you can get Larry Hama, I'll greenlight the thing right now." What he didn't know was that Larry and I were already buddies. So I contacted Larry and talking to him about Spy Hunter, and he was like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, it was this video game in the early '80s, and we all loved it, and it was meant to be James Bond, but it's this great car and machine guns, and I wanted to do like a Cold War era espionage story." And for about 5 minutes, he was like, "Huh?" And so I had to slowly explain it to him. And finally he was like, "Okay, yeah." Because Larry does play video games, but Larry plays like fighter plane flight simulators, the highest end that you can imagine. Like he's like in an A-10 Warthog with like the exact control readouts, like a perfect flight simulator, dogfighting MiGs,
with the fancy controller.
Yeah. So anyway, we started putting it together, and the coolest thing about it was, I'll get even more dorky, but my favorite memory of the whole project was the whole time it just felt like he was writing it all for me. Like it felt really personal. I felt like I was Paperboy and he was Spy Hunter. Like that dynamic that you see in that book, that's the way it felt working with him the whole time. And I tell people, because every once in a while you see somebody will put a post up on social media saying he's a grump or something. It's very rare. People don't normally talk trash about Larry. but Larry's like the friendliest drill instructor you could ever have. Imagine you're going into the Army. He's a drill instructor, but it's the friendliest drill instructor of all time. That's been my relationship with Larry. And even when I messed up, like even if I made mistakes, because he knew how much time that I had put in on this thing. Even when I messed up, he wouldn't be like, that doesn't work. He would be like, okay, next time, try this. I'd be like, okay,
Matt, what is an example of you messing up?
He didn't like all the orange in California in the opening of the first issue. He was like,
Why?
what's with all this orange? I hadn't done that in any other books. I'll work with blues, reds, greens. So all the sunset stuff in orange, Larry thought, this is too much. Like, this is a lot. This is like issue 1 is wildly orange. He didn't make me change it. And he didn't even say all those words that I just said. What he said was, I love it. What's with all the orange? And that was the end of it.
When did Paperboy show up in the pitch or the concept? Because this isn't just a video game tie-in. This is an arbitrary crossover of two video games that have nothing to do with each other. This isn't like Mario going back to Donkey Kong.
Yeah. Well, the way I pitched it was, and Larry made the whole thing better. Just like I said to Dan, I said, maybe we need to have a pro come in here so it's sound. But I put together a story about this kid. It was this half Irish, half Mexican kid in California that is, maybe 12 or 13 years old. He's an orphan, but the city doesn't know that he's an orphan. And he's got a paper route. That's how he makes his money. He plays Little League baseball. Like, I put a lot of things from my childhood into this. And one night, a friend of his, who's just a friendly person that he delivers papers to, 2 Russian assassins kill this man. And he witnesses it. And there's a radio involved. And he starts talking on the radio. He runs from these guys. And these Russians are trying to kill him, and he loses them, circles back around, and goes back to his friend's house. The guy.
Okay, Matt. So this is the story explanation.
Yeah.
But in the conceptual, did Dan Didio say to you, this is going to be a video game crossover?
Yes.
It didn't start as just Spy Hunter. It did start as Spy Hunter and this other game. Figure it out.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, he said, I want to do a Spy Hunter and Paperboy mashup.
Okay.
What do you got?
And the same way that DC did some of the Hanna-Barbera and DC superhero mashups.
Correct.
Okay. Because 2 is better than 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
well, whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, you were describing the plot there essentially from issue 1. So was it a case of you coming up with a lot of the plot and then handing it across to Hama and say, right, this is my idea, now give it a bit of a spit and polish, turn it into a proper script?
That little snippet that I just told you guys, that's the only thing of my original pitch that Larry picked up on. Like, and even what appears in the actual comic book does not happen the way that I had pitched it. Like, Larry made everything much smarter. He gave everything a lot more heart. He made everything work. Like, everything became sound. Like having a radio transmitter, needing a relay out in the water from the other guys, being jammed, using military satellite systems to bounce messages around the globe. And it's supposed to be 66. I know it says 1964, but while I was working on it, it was 66. I mean, you'll see a piece of artwork that says Spy Hunter 66. That was promo art. It's funny how many little tips of the hat he snuck in there. Also, young Stevie Wonder is in the book as in the gas station, part of the cleanup crew that cleans up Merlin. They bring Martinez his bike, but you only see him in one shot. It's a black guy with sunglasses, but that's actually
is that you decide making an art decision, or in Hama's
Yes.
plot is he just
no,
casting
no,
it?
no, no. It's not supposed to be Stevie Wonder.
Okay, because Hama
does.
does cast people he knows or like
Yeah.
famous actors in roles in his plots.
Yeah.
I
And
think
you were correct about Russ Heath and Morrow. Like I tried to get Heath's likeness as close as I could when he showed up. So
it's hard when it's hard when characters are only on panel for 2 panels.
2 or 3 shots. Yeah. So yeah.
And did you find out about those pilots? Who they are supposed to be?
No, I don't think there's any secret backstory behind those guys. It's just that he wanted them to be. He didn't give me much. The only description he had was 2 kind of waspy looking white dudes with nice Rolex watches on. That's all he gave me. So I put in the vodka bottle, like them passing the bottle of vodka. And he liked that. He thought that was really funny, these drinking pilots. And them handing the bottle to Bowman. Anybody want to warm up? And Bowman's like, yeah, pass it over here. And there's a spot where they flipped over and they're taking the G's really hard, and there's some golf clubs that pop up in the background. So I figured these guys are drinking vodka and playing golf all day when they're not, doing CIA wet work project stuff. Yeah, so that was pretty cool. It was pretty fun stuff. Also, by the way, issue number 1, that cover, that was promo art. That was never meant to be the cover for issue number 1. That was just the first artwork that I did for Didio, and he was like, badass, let's go. Issue number 2, I did not do that cover. Somebody slapped together some images from inside the book. This was during COVID. Slapped some images together and put that on there. Issue number 3, that was the first cover that I did for Spy Hunter. That was the first one, and it's really not even finished. Like, I sent it in, it got used anyway. When COVID hit, everything fell apart. Issue 4, that's just images slapped together from my artwork from inside the pages. Issue 5, that was the second cover that I did for the Spy Hunter Paperboy series. And issue 6 that you see there, again, that was just slapped together by somebody in an art department that they just threw it together. So really, I only did 2 covers for Spy Hunter and Paperboy. Issue 1, that's me, but it was just promo work that I put together. And weird things happen with contracts. Like, I wasn't paid for 5 of those issues. I was paid for 2,
The covers, you mean?
Yeah, covers. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you make comics digitally.
Yeah.
And you have talked to us about reading comics on paper and drawing on paper from comics that are physically in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
Do you read comics on screens? How do you feel about this being digital first?
The only comic books that I read digitally, I've got like the first 3 or 4 years of G.I. Joe. I've got like issue 1 through, I don't know how far it goes. Pretty much through my wave of guys, maybe 85. Like, I've got all those issues digitally that I can read on my phone or that I can read on a pad. But no, I've got a couple of things that are digital because I can get them digital only. But no, I prefer to have a physical copy. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's pretty heartbreaking. The Spy Hunter thing comes out, it's like hardly even announced. And part of me believes that it would not have been announced, or it might not have even come out. When the AT&T acquired DC. Okay, so here's some more fun. Spy Hunter happens, put it together. We're working on it, put it together. Another Christmas, Didio, I'm talking to Didio and I say, okay, I've got this idea for DC's combat comics. All that combat IP that you have, I want to do a weird war story where Griffin the Werewolf in 1969 is no longer a part of the Creature Commandos. He's a he's a biker gang guy, solo. He's a werewolf biker gang guy in California that can't stop drinking and getting in trouble. And his handler, Faraday, shows up, bails him out of jail, and says, I can't stop doing this. You're a real problem. The cops found you completely naked. Your bike was totally trashed. They don't know why there's not a scratch on you because they don't know you're a werewolf. And the people the Hells Angels that you messed up in that bar, 6 of them are in intensive care right now. No, you didn't fully transform, but you turned into something that they think they saw. I've got to give you a job. I've just been promoted with my intelligence agency. We think that your brother is alive on a second dinosaur island, the brother you lost in the Pacific War. So the story follows Griffin the werewolf breaks into Area 51, steals the GI robot, and takes him to Dinosaur Island 2 to find his brother. And DiDio was like, that's insane. Let's do that. That's crazy, because he likes monsters and combat and stuff. He's like, yeah, let's totally do that. This was at Christmas, and he said, when I get back, January, after Christmas break, we'll set up all the contracts and do all that stuff. He gets back and gets canned. So Chiarello got canned just before that. The deal gets canned just after that. So the Creature Commando dream project that I had doesn't happen. Drag. And then, COVID's going on. Larry writes me. He's like, what's going on with Spy Hunter? I said, I don't know, man. Everything's been in a standstill. I really don't know. And he said, well, I know Javins. I'll give her a shout, find out what's going on.
You mean editor-in-chief Marie Javins?
Yeah, she replaced DiDio. He said, I'll give her a shout and see what's going on. And
sorry,
dude,
you had finished it by this point, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's just
and how long had it, you mentioned you spent a long time on it. How long did it actually take, the project?
I don't know. I might have taken 2 years. I had no deadline. Like DiDio, I was reporting to DiDio essentially. I had no deadline. There was supposed to be other teams of creators creating content so that it could all come out in the same splash. And I don't think they had anybody else. I don't think there was anybody working on a Joust comic book or anybody working on a whatever, Zaxxon comic book or whatever the other, I could be wrong, but, and then COVID hits and then we're just sitting on everything. Everybody shuts down. Comic book store owners are losing their livelihood. Comic creators are like, what are we going to do? I wrote Shaken, or I talked to Shaken on the phone, and he said, I don't know, man. None of us know what's going on. None of us know what's happening. We're just going to have to ride this out and see what goes on. And
okay, so Hama reaches out to Javins, and what does he say?
He says, I'll give her a shout and find out what's going on. Dude, 15 minutes later, she emails me. Like, so it's like lightning. Larry Hama strikes like lightning. And she just sends me an email and says, we'll figure something out. We'll get this out. I can't help but shake the idea that Larry was like, this kid's not half bad. Okay. And he really had a good time working on this with me. And it's kind of like a dream thing for him. So if you can figure out some way to make this happen, I don't know if he said that stuff specifically, but that would all be 100% true. And so, yeah, lightning strikes. Larry Hama strikes. Marie Javins writes me, says, we'll figure something out. Even if it's just a digital release, we'll get it out there. I was like, okay. And then I talked to Hama later and, I was like, what happened? Like there was no promotion. Nobody knew about it. And I talked to, Larry said, I don't know, kid. We might have got tangled up in some weird politics. He said, that's probably likely. I didn't push it past that, but he was probably talking about office politics of some kind. The deal was canned. He might have made some people there mad. They might have wanted to incinerate everything that he had in the wings that he was working on and replace it with their work. And this would have been taken in that cull. At the same time, our bad guys in the story are Maoists and Marxists. I mean, it's an American mercenary fighting Maoist Chinese and Marxist Russians. And Warner Brothers and all the big studios are courting China during this time period to try to sell their IP to China and their movies and everything. Disney's altering things for Chinese releases. So there might have been some weird politics. I mean, I really don't know. I don't know.
And also, without the other video game tie-in books, it's a weird orphan.
It's weird. Exactly.
I have to feel like, as someone who draws digitally, you might love how it looks as a digital release because the colors are going to be pretty close to what's on your monitor. Whereas if it gets published, if it gets printed on paper, the colors are all going to be a little bit different, right? Maybe not as
Okay,
good.
here's some fun G.I. Joe dorky stuff. This one is a real weird one. It's juicy. You guys are gonna love this. So when I got my issue of Annual 2, there's a section where they're showing cells, animation cells of the animation series that's gonna be coming out. It hadn't come out yet, but in that annual, there are stills from that animated miniseries, and I was so excited to see these stills of the animated G.I. Joe series. You know, clearly you can see all of these influences in my style. Now, there's a weird thing that happens with my artwork when it goes into print. What you just said about the color, it looks different digitally than it does on paper. Here's the weird thing. I have a real nostalgic love for the way it looks on paper just because of those printed stills from G.I. Joe Annual 2 of the cartoon.
This is the article, Joe's on Television.
That's correct.
A text article about upcoming episodes.
That's correct. And the color looks slightly different printed in a comic book than it does on your TV screen. So there's always a little part of me when I see my stuff in print that thinks, this just reminds me of that warm feeling I had when I saw those stills of the G.I. Joe cartoon in 84 or 85, you know? So I'm real dorky and nostalgic about it. I don't mind the color change at all.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a good deep level of G.I. Joe nerding out. So as a follow-up, let me do this one quickly, Mark. Matt, are you making any decisions when you are drawing and coloring digitally because you know it is going to print on paper? I'm thinking about sort of saturation or contrast.
Yeah. They're sometimes things tend to be a little bit darker on paper, so I have to be careful. And I'm still kind of eyeballing that. So the cover of issue 3 right there, like I thought that whole thing was going to be a lot darker. Like that's how it looks digitally, but I expected it to be printed on a book. So I expected there to be a little more contrast in that picture. Same with the cover to issue 5. Like I'm always afraid of going too dark, unless I'm going flat black. So yeah.
My question was going to be, so there's the digital release that then happens for this, and is that the end of the Spy Hunter and Paperboy story? Is there any more to it?
Well, I mean, we had a sequel, and in the sequel, it's not 1966. It's Johnny Martinez in 1982 or 83. He's now the Spy Hunter, and it's the video game that we saw as kids. So it was all modernized. Now Johnny is 1982. Johnny Martinez is the Spy Hunter, but it's all boom boxes and parachute pants and Corvette from the 80s.
Okay, Matt, what you were describing is a like 1 paragraph pitch or like a 30-minute conversation, right? There's no work done on it.
That's correct. Yeah. I don't even know how that would happen.
You said you were a big fan of the Spy Hunter video game. Were you a fan of the Paperboy video game?
Not so much. I mean, I remember it, but Spy Hunter blew me away. Like I mowed my yard for my stepdad and had my I think I got a buck. I think I got a buck for mowing the yard or something. It might have been 2. And I had gone to the corner store, gone to 7-Eleven, and they had 2 new video games in there. Or, well, they at least had 1. And I had gone in there to get a Coke and a bunch of penny and nickel candy and maybe an issue of Savage Sword of Conan or G.I. Joe or something. And I went in there and saw this video game for the first time in my life and lost my mind. Spent my whole allowance on the video game, jumped on my bike, rode all the way home, raving to my stepdad about this video game. Like, you have to see this video game. and fortunately, he likes video games too. Like if we'd go to a pizza place where they had video games, he'd throw some quarters in the video game and do stuff. He just dug it too. And I described the game to him. It was like it's like switchblade tires and oil slicks, and you can't explain it. You got these 2 machine guns out of the front of you. You're wasting these guys that are trying to kill you on this highway. And I was so excited. And he said, "Well, go get some more, man." And he goes into his pocket and gives me $4. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe just through sheer excitement. I had already blown the $2 that I had been given for cutting the grass. And just because of my sheer excitement, he's like, "Well, go give it hell. Here's $4 more bucks." So I go right back up there and spend all $4 on Spy Hunter. You know what I mean?
Mark, I was gonna ask a question about now and the future, but before I do that, Mark, do you want to ask any more questions about stuff we've been getting to up till now?
Sort of. It's playing in the same ballpark. I had one specific question. But before that, I wanted to ask one just about the Spy Hunter, which was the overhead gaming view down on the road. Was that coming from you?
Yes. Yeah. Larry gives me very few camera angles. He doesn't give me camera shots really. He just gives me the story. I was just thinking, we've got to do this now. This is the final issue. Anybody that knows the game will really get a kick out of this, and so I'm doing this.
Okay, so I don't think I actually said this in our previous episode, but in those panels in the final issue, which do match the game, I haven't done a comparison side by side, but based on eyeballing it and memories, the cars do match. So
sort of.
Were you okay? So were you working that in? Were you feeding stuff to Larry? Was he doing any research on the game?
He had gone. Larry does research on everything. And here's another thing. He sent me file after file after file after file of every vehicle and firearm and everything that he was talking about. He never left me in the deep end. Not once.
You mean JPEGs? He's emailing you like a JPEG or two for every car.
Yeah. Like this is a grenade launcher from the time period. This is the only thing that he left to me was the car. Like this, I had the car put together. I wanted it to be this model. I'm completely locked up on what model. I should be skinned for not remembering what model of car this is.
Okay, if you remember later, Mark will superimpose it over me talking right now on screen.
Yeah. And I just knew that it just looks so sexy. Like the curves, the car looks like a beautiful girl. I mean, it's just a really sexy car, But he would send me tons of JPEGs of here's the guns, here's the this, here's the that. Just and anytime I'd run into a problem, or I'd be like, I don't know if I can get the angle on that or whatever. He'd be like, don't worry about it. Just try not to do anything. If you find a substitute, go ahead and use a substitute. It's not a problem. Just try to keep it pre-1970, okay? I mean, we need to try to keep everything as vintage as possible. I'm trying not to use, and anything we used that was actually didn't show up militarily in the field until whatever, 68, 69, 70, we just treated them all like they were prototypes because they would have been somewhere years earlier on a drawing board or in a warehouse.
That was a good cue. Let me follow that thread. In the video game, in the original video game, you see the car from above.
Yeah.
In the gameplay, and you see one or two angles of it on the marquee on the sides, and like in the marketing materials.
Yeah.
So, what was your thinking of adapting or not the original video game car design for the comic?
I was just greedy. I just loved the body of this car. It was like, I don't care.
The one that you ended up with, the one that you were thinking of.
Well, and also it's 15 years before. So I might have gone closer to the one in the game, which may be a Lamborghini. Like Martinez, he might have been in that actual car, and had that black leather jacket and the
in the sequel, you mean?
Yeah, in the sequel that takes place in '82. Yeah, and everybody's still alive. It's just that Bowman is not the He's not the primary agent. Bowman's in a support facility of some faculty of some kind. Tanaka, same. All the players are back, unless Chief got wasted in a bar somewhere, which is likely. But yeah. No, it was just me. I got a 3D model of this car, and I could stretch the perspective on it, and it was. I just thought it was really beautiful, and I was like, I'm going to use this car. Like, this is how this is going to work, because I'm not somebody that can just bust out a beautiful body of a car like this without spending hours and hours on it. So, I mean, that wasn't the only digital model that I used. There were many digital models used for this in order to make it look like, friends of mine have said, it looks like you're playing with toys. I mean, they remind me of toys. I mean, there's something about it that it's whimsical like that. And I like that aspect of it too. So,
Matt, there are sequels to the original video game. There's that movie that never happened.
Right.
Were you, Didio, Hama, at all thinking about anything beyond the original game?
Didio might have been. I think more than anything, as far as my discussions with Dan went, he was just really fun and enthusiastic, and he just liked my enthusiasm, like the same way that I got my dad to give me $4 more to go down there, and because I was so excited about this video game. As soon as he heard me being that excited, he was just happy. I think he was just good old fashioned. This sounds fun and happy, and everybody is happy. I don't know how much forethought he put into it. It's the same with the Creature Commando story that I wanted to do. It's completely insane. Werewolf soldier goes to Dinosaur Island with combat robot to find his brother, and it turns out there's a bunch of Nazis got washed up on the island, and he's going to go in there and waste a bunch. It was just insane fun, like some kind of Tarantino or John Carpenter or John Milius story. That there's no moral. There's no. We're not delivering any message other than this kicks ass.
Have you seen Hama in person since the pitch days in Texas?
I have not.
Okay.
It just we've Zoomed or Skyped a couple of times. I don't really do the Zoom thing. So the first time I actually did it was with him. We were talking about the Vic Falcon thing. And he's in this room, this little room. This was in his New York apartment. And he's got like the Storm Shadow room, secret room upstairs. And there's kick-ass models everywhere and cool little toys everywhere. And then he pulls up an MP40, a German submachine gun. Boom! Like puts it right in the camera sideways. And he's like, check this out. And I was like, whoa! And he's like, yeah, man. I mean, he's essentially what you said. Your observations about him having kids in stories, young kids in stories, they're not the victims. They get integrated. You're very insightful with what you said about Hama's work. And us as kids, we want to be a part of the team. We want to know if we can hack it with this group of Joes that they're in. You're not thrown into a basket, kidnapped, and thrown in the back of a truck, and somebody's got to help. You're trained by a ninja somewhere. You're helping Spy Hunter somehow. You're in there. And you said something about, I think it's because Hama in his heart is like 12 or 13. I mean, he still holds on to that, and he does, and I do too, and I'm sure you guys do too.
Yeah, the thing you mentioned earlier that once or twice online someone calls Hama a grump. That's such a strange reaction, because if you see him on a panel or if you talk with him, he just cracks jokes.
Yeah.
Like he's pretty even keel, but like he will tell the story and he'll laugh. Yeah,
he's very easy to laugh. That's one of my favorite things about talking with him on the phone. I mean, even if he's very he's like I said, he's like the friendliest drill instructor in the world. I mean, and very easy to laugh. And even when I come to him like confused, You know, like during COVID, I was like, what's going on? Or, you know, what's going on with this weird political stuff that's going on? I mean, you know, and he's like, well, we're going to have to write it out. And I don't know exactly. And he's very fatherly. I mean, in a lot of ways, you know, he's like this weird surrogate dad for us Joe fans, you know, in a lot of ways. He was that for me as a kid. I felt like everything he says about the Joes being a family, that whole thing, is very real. He nails it. He knows exactly what he's doing.
I had a question which was about, you know, having this relationship and this in with Hama, being such a G.I. Joe fan. Was there any discussion about actually working with him on G.I. Joe itself?
We were going to do a Vietnam flashback story with the LERP team, Tommy and Wilkinson and Snake Eyes. I've got artwork for it. It was completely vintage, long range reconnaissance patrol, one shot, set in whatever 1968.
What happened?
It may still happen. I don't know. No, I mean it could still happen. I mean, there's other stuff I'm working on. I still have my connections with him. He's now plugged in with the new publisher, right?
Yeah,
Skybound.
Skybound. It's continuing in issue 301 is due out November, I think, this year from Skybound. So Hama's still writing it. It's still coming out. So
Matt,
don't wait too long.
Matt, as fans who write letters, or as highly influential and respected podcasters with a massive audience, there is only so much we can do. We don't have the cocky, booze-fueled confidence that might come at Christmas over Facebook to just accost the publisher of one of the big two in American comics, and maybe with Hama, or maybe just you on your own and mentioning Hama, I would encourage you to see if you can make a connection at Skybound with Hama. And
sure. It'd be a dream come true if I can do anything right now. I mean, it even trumps. Like if somebody put a Johnny Quest series in my hand right now, that would make me really, really happy. Like set it like, you know, in 1964, it would be a blast. Or if somebody put Indiana Jones story in my hand, it would be a blast. But the number one thing I would do for the rest of my life would be draw G.I. Joe. I mean, it's specifically, I would love to draw the characters in an adventure after Vietnam, before the Joe team's put together, with a crew in like 1978 or 1980, like you know, something that's not Vietnam, but it's all that time period, you know.
Talking Joe listeners, please begin politely posting in places that Skybound editors and principals will see. And if you are emailing letters to your favorite Skybound letters pages, please put in a plug in your next message or email for Matthew Reynolds to draw a Larry Hama G.I. Joe story. Just to clarify for our viewers who are watching this right now, the piece of art that we're looking at is not connected to anything official. It's just art you made for fun.
Probably 2008.
Fan art from 2008. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you can definitely see issue 21, how much of an influence it is. I mean, yeah. And I actually sent you guys some picture of Zap from Vietnam. So you've actually got one of my Vietnam pieces that I did. If you find there's, I don't know if you've got access to it right now, but it's called Same Shit, Different Day. And it's Zap.
Right. Yeah, give me a second.
An M16 in like 1968. So as if he would have been somehow in there. And, you know, I would want like Clutch to be in the motor pool. There he is. There's Zap. He doesn't have his bazooka, but I figure he's maybe not a specialist yet. But
okay,
that is.
Matt, this G.I. Joe story with Hama for Skybound that does not exist.
Yeah.
You're thinking a couple pages flashback, 10, 12-page backup story, 22-page self-contained issue,
22-page one shot.
double-sized. Okay.
Yeah, or I'm not thinking miniseries. I mean, I'm thinking like
Double-sized yearbook.
Double-sized yearbook, maybe something like that. I mean, to even just to do a 22-page story like Golden did in the annual number 2, to pour everything I've got into making sure all the gear and the everything they're wearing is authentic, and even messing around with I don't know, this might be too far, but I mean, if there was a story like set in 75 or 76, having like prototypes of Flash's laser equipment that doesn't quite look like it did in 82 when we saw him as kids.
It's much bigger.
Yeah, bigger battery, or prototypes of the jump pack, or and I'd love to see Clutch, and I'd love to do an adult take on it, like where Clutch is like definitely drinking a bunch of Coors, working in the motor pool. Like he's not supposed to be, but he's got there's 8 cans of Coors Yellow Bellies in there, and he's listening to Led Zeppelin. And
I think this T for Teen rated book may top out at Yo Joe Cola.
Right.
Mark, I was gonna ask my final question, unless you wanted to jump in.
I was just going to make the observation that you talk to Larry, say maybe there's a natural break point in between an arc.
Yeah.
Maybe the next time they swap out the artist who maybe is only going to do 4 issues at a time before the next artist comes on, that would be a good time for maybe a standalone issue. And who's got 2 thumbs and can draw the heck out of a standalone issue?
That guy. Okay, so Matt, before we hit record, you told us about something you're working on right now, and there's very little you can tell the rest of the audience about it. But you can confirm that you are working on your next project right now.
Yes.
And it's comics, and it's in color, and it looks like things you have drawn in the past.
Yes, it's slightly more serious than it's slightly more serious than Spy Hunter. Like you mentioned some of those animated faces that I would do. Like there's like a handful of contorted, wild, crazy animation style faces in Spy Hunter. Like when somebody's about to get wasted or hit a car or something. That stuff is not happening as much. It looks more like the picture you've got on the screen. Like it looks more like this right here. It's more serious. I mean, it's slightly cartoony, but I mean, yeah. Look, come on, that could definitely be Lonzo Wilkinson right there.
Do you have a publisher? Do you have a a schedule? Okay.
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be announced after the first of the new year.
Okay.
So that's all I know so far.
How long have you've been working on it? For some time.
It was on again, off again.
Okay.
On again, off again. Marie Javins, after I finished the Spy Hunter story, connected me with the writer that I'm working with. He's a pretty big name, and she sent the Spy Hunter stuff to him, and she said, "This is interesting. You might want to see if this kid wants to do something." And he just took her up on it, and so I started working with him on it. Yeah.
I look forward to its inevitable delay when you get pulled off of it by yourself to do some G.I. Joe project.
Right.
I look forward to this project that you can't tell us about getting bumps to 2025 or 2026, so I can selfishly get 10 or 20 pages of G.I. Joe out of you. Mark, I have run out of questions.
I mean, I think I could quite easily keep on going. It's just knowing where to stop and what to stop talking about. But just because you've sent them to me and they're so cool, maybe you can just talk a little bit about the Danger Close images that you shared with me.
Sure.
It seems to be that there's this sort of DNA of the art that things that appeal to you. It's the kind of it's period setting, it's military, it's dinosaurs. Right. That's your jam.
Yeah. So when we were all hanging our heads low during COVID and nobody knew what was going to happen, and we thought it's all over now. And I was like, well, I mean, hell, if this is the last hurrah and I might be dead in a couple years, what would I just want to do? Like, what makes me not feel sad? Because it was a real depressing time. I went through a depression during that time. Thankfully, I came out of it, but it was like, I just got to think about stuff that makes me happy and get back to work, because I wasn't working. I mean, it shut everything down. Everything felt hopeless. And so, you know, I came up with, I wanted to do, I said, well, okay, hell, I'll just do this and I'll publish it just digitally online for free. At least it's something. And I can get eyeballs on it. And it might lead to something else. And if I wanted to do something, what would it be? And it was this Danger Close, Strange Tales of Combat and Survival. It was just going to be like 5 to 8 page stories of crazy, strange tales of combat and survival. I mean, like Twilight.
Is this you doing The War That Time Forgot?
Well, yeah. These were the images that I sent to Didio for the Dinosaur Island pitch, and he was like, "This totally works." And so I just started putting this stuff together because it was fun, and I was inspired to do it because it's like a little boy playing with GI Joes and plastic dinosaurs in a sandbox when you're 8 years old, and I started thinking all these daydreams that I had as a little boy, having the skills that I have now, just go back and apply it to that fond time in my life when there was no COVID and before 9/11 and before trouble came into your life, when you were just a kid and things were simpler. If you had the skills to do what you daydreamed about then, what would it look like if you did it now? And that's what these were. There's also a second project that I still have called The Nam That Time Forgot. And that's what was born from this Danger Close project. And it's just like this Twilight Zone thing with Russian and Chinese communist scientists on the border of Cambodia and Vietnam in 1969 are fooling around with a technology they don't quite understand, ripping a hole in the fabric of time and space, letting prehistoric creatures spill into the jungles of Vietnam and Cambodia. And within 1 month, the Vietnam War is over and there is no conflict. It's just mopping up all these creatures that are eating people over there. So, and that was a very whimsical, fun thing. And I wanted to do it like, it's not a linear story with like lead characters. It was meant to be a documentary. So like if Ken Burns did a documentary about these soldiers and what happened to them, and you know, you just see some unit with a bunch of cases of beer standing on a Tyrannosaurus skull with all their weapons, and you know, like wow, we bagged one in the Da Nang, you know, and it was just meant to be fun, crazy stuff. That's what this stuff was.
Excellent. It looks it looks amazing. So we've been talking quite a long time, so we're probably coming to a sort of a natural pause, even though I feel like we could keep on going. So thank you so much for your time, and thanks so for the efforts that you've been putting into your art, so that we can actually enjoy them as readers, because it was a thrilling discovery to find out about the Spy Hunter and Paperboy book, and I think you know, it will bring a lot of joy to all of those people that haven't yet had a chance to experience it as well. And yes, and of course, very much looking forward to your future projects, and fingers crossed that issue of G.I. Joe that will definitely happen at some point.
I'm already disappointed that it's not going to happen.
I just want to stay in touch. I just want to stay in touch with you guys and I'll keep you up to date on, because if there's one audience that is going to dig the stuff that I dig and the stuff that I want to do, it's you guys and your listeners. I mean, Matt, basically everything I do is geared towards you guys. So,
Matt, I can promise you that I'm already disappointed that your G.I. Joe story won't happen, because the publisher and editors and schedules and availability and politics. And when it happens, we will definitely talk to you for 2 hours about it.
Cool.
Tight as a drum. That's what Mark. That's what I was circling around my head in our previous episode. My review for the 6th issue for the story, the 6 issues of Spy Hunter and Paperboy, tight as a drum,
Cool.
right? So 5 issues, 8 issues, no, 6 issues.
Yeah.
Right? Everything you need, but also leaves you wanting. That's my one sentence review.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And my whole feeling working on that project can be summed up between Bowman and Martinez at the end of the 6 issues, where the kid's like, "This is the greatest day of my life." Bowman says, "No, it's the first day of the rest of your life." And that was basically a conversation between me and Larry Hama right there on that last page. So yeah, lots of love, guys. I can't wait to talk to you again.
And if people want to find you or find out more about you, is there a best place to go to find you online?
I'm on Instagram. I don't put a lot of stuff over there. I'm on Facebook. I pretty much only post artwork and goofy stuff over there. But yeah, you can find me out there.
What's your Instagram handle? It's
the same. It's probably all going to be Matthew Mac Ray Reynolds. So, which again, my wife hates, but
it's those 4 names in a row. No quotes.
Yeah.
Okay.
No quotes. Yeah.
Excellent stuff. And so, for everyone watching, if you enjoyed this, you can find us on talkingjoe.co.uk to find more G.I. Joe comics talk. And big thank you to all of our Patreons who are continuing to support us. Look for the future as we look forward to the Skybound era of G.I. Joe, continue to rediscover the Devil's Due era and more besides, like talking to fantastic artists. Tim, where can people find you when you're not talking to me and Matt about G.I. Joe?
Video essays on TV and film at our YouTube channel, Atomic Abe Productions. My brick and mortar comic book store, Hub Comics, is in Somerville, Massachusetts. And I write about G.I. Joe at arealamericanbook.com.
So, after all of that, I think we are done, which only leaves us to say, Tim, that
nobody beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Indeed. Laters.
Take it easy, guys. I'll just split. I just really love talking with you guys, and I would love to talk with you more. I mean,
sir, you must draw a G.I. Joe story for a return. For a return invitation to our illustrious and popular podcast platform.
Well, maybe I should just do one.